My friends, it is great to be in the great city of Atlanta, in the great state of Georgia, and tomorrow we're going to make Donald Trump the next president of the United States, so it's a good day. I got a few people I want to thank here before we get started. Of course, first, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones. Burt, thank you so much, man. Appreciate your leadership, appreciate everything you've done. God bless you, man. We've got the great Congressman Barry Loudermilk. Barry, where are you? Thank you, Barry. Got perhaps the best social media user in the U.S. Congress, Congressman Mike Collins. Mike, good to see you, man. And my friend Matt Gaetz. Matt, where are you? Thank you, Matt. Good to see you, man. Former Senator Kelly Loeffler. Kelly, thank you so much for everything you've done. Kelly's been such a great champion for us in this campaign. Ag Commissioner Tyler Harper. Where are you, Tyler? God bless you, man. Good to see you. And then last but certainly not least is my favorite person here. No offense to any of you. My lovely wife, Usha. Thank you, honey. I love you. So look, here's the thing. We're done with early voting in the state of Georgia, so tomorrow is the day. Tomorrow is the day that we vote for the future. So tomorrow is the day that we vote for change. Tomorrow is the day that we vote for lower grocery prices and more affordable housing. Tomorrow is the day that we vote to close the border and make Donald J. Trump the President of the United States. Now, I didn't realize how small this was. In 2020, Georgia was decided by less than 12,000 votes. That is crazy. Less than 12,000 votes in the great state of Georgia. So here's the request that I'm going to make of every single person here. I want every single one of you to get out there and vote for Donald J. Trump 10 times. Now, of course, the media is going to report that I come to Atlanta. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution headline is going to be, J.D. Vance encourages mass voter fraud in Atlanta. No, here is the legal way. The legal way to vote 10 times is to get your friends to the polls and take yourself to the polls and get 9 of your friends and family to go along with you. That's the legal way to vote 10 times, and that's what we got to do. I mean, the message of this campaign is actually very simple down the stretch. As much as Kamala Harris is running as much as she can from the record of the last 4 years, we know that Kamala Harris broke it and Donald J. Trump will fix it. It's that easy. You know, Kamala Harris, I got to say, she has run a campaign that is based in fundamental dishonesty, but it's also based on a bet. A bet that the American people aren't going to be wise enough to notice the fact that Kamala Harris has been lying to them for the past 3 months. You know, we were in Las Vegas a couple of weeks ago, and we get to the tarmac at the same exact time as Governor Tim Walz, my Democratic colleague, who, of course, is running to be Kamala Harris's vice president. You know, I'm going to say something nice about Governor Tim Walz. I want all of you, if you're the praying type, and I imagine we've got a lot of Christians and other people of faith in this room, say a prayer for Tim Walz, because he's got the toughest job in American politics. Think about this. You know, we've all had tough days at work, right? Our hands hurt, our backs tired, but you have never had such a tough day where your job is to go around and convince the American people that Kamala Harris can be the president of the United States. That's a very tough day at work. And Tim Walz has been doing it every day for the past 3 months. But think about this. The whole argument of their campaign is that Tim Walz and Kamala Harris have nothing to do with the policies of the last 3 months, even though Kamala Harris is the sitting vice president of the United States. When you put a teleprompter in front of her, Kamala Harris will talk a big game about what she's going to do. And I think all of us are saying, Kamala, if you want to do all these things, why haven't you done them already? You're the sitting vice president. You could do it right now. You know, I've never met anybody in politics who's shameless enough to stand before the American people as the sitting vice president and to say on day one, we're going to make groceries and housing more affordable. She'll say on day one, we're going to get serious about the southern border. Kamala, you've been the vice president for 1,400 days. Day one was 3.5 years ago. What the hell have you been doing the whole time? Stop talking about doing your job and go out there and do it. Now, I will say, in Kamala's defense, every time she tells a dishonest thing, and she's got the teleprompter in front of her, the teleprompter tells Kamala Harris what she has to say, but every now and then Kamala Harris will go out there and she'll do a softball interview and she'll make a gaffe. And you know what a gaffe is? A gaffe is when Kamala Harris accidentally tells the truth. Now, she doesn't talk to the media very often, and when she does, it's almost always a softball interview. But think about this. Kamala Harris does these softball interviews, and as all of you will know, I know this is a proud baseball town. The problem with a softball interview is you've got to be able to hit a softball. And I don't know that Kamala Harris could hit a T-ball, my friends, based on what we've seen over the last few months. But, she gave an interview with The View just a couple of weeks ago. Did you see the interview that Kamala Harris did on The View? Most of you thankfully said no, and here's the request that I'll make. If you haven't seen that interview on The View, wait at least 24 hours because we need you as sharp as possible, and I'm telling you, you're going to lose 20 IQ points if you go and watch Kamala Harris on The View. But here's what she says on The View. Remember, her whole argument of her campaign is that she doesn't even know who Joe Biden is, even though she's a sitting vice president. And The View host asked her, what would you have done differently over the last 4 years? Would you have done anything differently than Joe Biden? And Kamala Harris says, nothing comes to mind. Nothing. Well, ma'am, that's right. The Harris Waltz slogan could be, nothing comes to mind. Think about this. Kamala, what would you do to fix the broken policies to make groceries and housing more affordable? Nothing comes to mind. Kamala Harris, what would you do to secure that southern border? Nothing comes to mind, right? That's what Kamala Harris's campaign slogan could be. But in that moment, she revealed that she is not who she says she is. She's been going around the country for the last 3 months, promising that she's going to fix what she herself broke. She's been going around the country saying that she's somehow going to lower the price of groceries, even though she cast the deciding vote on trillions of dollars in new spending. She's been going around saying that she got religion about border security a few months ago, even though she's been the border czar at a time of a historic open border. And so our message to Kamala Harris is, we don't believe that you're the candidate of change. We don't believe what you say you're going to do. We believe what you've done for the last 3.5 years, and you are fired. Go back to San Francisco, where you belong. We don't need you in the Oval Office. Now, the record of Kamala Harris, it's when you look at just the statistics of what's been going on in this country, it's hard to believe how much suffering our fellow citizens have been experiencing. Credit card delinquencies are over 9%. You know what that means? That means that 1 in 10 of our fellow citizens can't afford to pay their bills. Auto loan delinquencies are north of 8%. That means many, many people can't afford to pay their car payments. We've got our citizens who are paying 25% more for groceries, 45% more for gas, and of course, if you're a young person, good luck affording a home in Kamala Harris's economy, because Kamala Harris thinks that American housing ought to go to illegal aliens. Well, how about we elect an American president who says American housing ought to go to American citizens and make the American dream of homeownership more affordable again? Now, we got a lot of great leaders here, and they all appreciate this. The reason that Donald Trump, the reason why he was so successful as president is because he pursued some common sense economic policies. Think about that. When Donald Trump was president, I've got the easiest job in American politics because while Tim Walz has to go around the country pretending that Kamala Harris didn't break it, all I have to do is go around the country and talk about Donald Trump's actual record of achievement during the 4 years when he was in office. And what a record of achievement it is. When Donald J. Trump was president, Inflation was at 1.5%. The dollar went far. People could afford groceries. They could afford gasoline. When Donald J. Trump was president, take-home pay was rising faster than it had in 40 years in the United States of America. And when Donald J. Trump was president, we were building the wall and the border was secure. That is the Donald J. Trump record. All we got to do tomorrow is get back to it. And you know, that's the thing about this race is, for the first time in the lifetime of every person in our country, we don't just have plans and policies and slogans between Kamala Harris. We've got actual records. We can see how Kamala Harris has governed over the last 4 years, and we know how Donald J. Trump governed when he was the president of the United States. Isn't it nice? You know, in the corporate media and Kamala Harris or surrogates, they lie about Donald J. Trump all the time. But we know the truth that when Donald J. Trump was president, the world was more peaceful, our checkbooks were growing, the country was more prosperous, our fellow citizens could afford to live a decent life, and the border was secure. That's a hell of a record to run on. Let's get back to it by making our guy the President of the United States. Now, here's, you know, let's talk about plans for just a little bit, because if you compare and contrast the Kamala Harris approach and the Kamala Harris proposals against the Donald J. Trump proposals, it's very obvious who's going to be better for the American people, who's going to be better for the voters of Georgia, especially the swing voters who are watching at home. We know who's going to deliver for the American people because we already saw Donald J. Trump do it. But just think about this. You know, I don't know if I've ever seen in my lifetime a politician like Kamala Harris go around and brag about the fact that she wants to raise your taxes. I've never seen it. Usually, Matt Gaetz will tell you, the Democrats who want to raise your taxes, they're at least smart enough to lie about it, to hide it from you, and not to go out there and tell you. But Kamala Harris is bragging about the fact that she wants to raise the taxes of Georgia families. She said she wants to let the wildly successful Trump tax cuts expire, and that's going to cost the average Georgia family thousands of dollars per year. Thousands of dollars per year that you're going to be paying to the federal government instead of keeping your own money and spending it how you see fit. That's the Kamala Harris plan. And it's not just that. It's not just that she wants to raise your taxes. It's what she wants to do with the money. We were in Michigan earlier today, and you know Kamala Harris is telling us all that she wants to raise your taxes so that she can reward foreign corporations that make electric vehicles in China. And I happen to think that we ought to cut the taxes of American workers and penalize foreign corporations that are making jobs in China. Let's reward companies that are making jobs right here at home. That's common sense. You know, my favorite Kamala Harris interviews, the best ones of all, and this is the sacrifice I've accepted to be your next vice president, is I watch Kamala Harris interviews so that you don't have to, my friends. This is a life of service I've taken upon myself, and I don't take it lightly. But you know, they ask her, they'll say, well, Kamala Harris, you've been the vice president for 4 years. Americans can't afford to buy the things they need to buy. What is your specific plan to fix what you yourself broke? And she'll say, well, you know, I grew up in a middle-class family. Or they'll say, Kamala, you know, you seem to not care a whole lot about border security during your first 3.5 years as what's your plan to secure that southern border? And she'll say, you know, when I worked at the McDonald's, I was really good at making the hash browns. And, you know, anybody with a lick of common sense is saying, Kamala, you didn't answer the question. And by the way, I think maybe my running mate has worked at McDonald's for longer than Kamala Harris has. But who knows? But think about this. We know that the best way to lower prices for Georgia families is to unleash American energy. Because think about this. if you've got a truck driver who's paying 45% more for diesel, then the groceries that truck driver is delivering to the grocery store are going to be more expensive for everybody. If you take a guy who's delivering lumber to the job site and he's paying 40% more for gasoline, then all of us are going to be paying more for the houses that are built at that job site. So if you want to lower prices for American consumers, let me give you a specific answer. You ought to stop buying oil and gas from tin pot dictators all over the world. Let's drill, baby, drill, and get it from our own citizens in our own territory. And of course, President Trump wants to build on the successful economic record. We're not just talking about the record, even though the record is very good. President Trump thinks that if you're working overtime, you ought to be able to keep more of your own money. That's why we're doing no taxes on overtime. That's a big one. You know, Kamala Harris wants to give, if you've been paying into Social Security your whole life, Kamala Harris wants to give your Social Security benefits to illegal aliens, people who don't have the legal right to be here. Donald J. Trump wants to say no taxes on the Social Security. You paid into it your whole life. You ought to be able to enjoy the benefits in retirement. But we're talking a lot, of course, about what Kamala Harris broke and all the ways in which Donald J. Trump will fix it. But you know, the biggest thing that she broke, of course, is the American southern border. And we got to talk about it. Now, I was in Valdosta, Georgia, a few weeks ago. This was actually before Hurricane Helene hit. And, of course, it hurt Valdosta pretty badly, and hopefully they're recovering well, and we're going to support them because, you know what, it'd be nice to have an American president who had FEMA do its job and support American citizens, and we're going to have that when Donald J. Trump is back in the White House. But I was in Valdosta, and you all may know, because it sits at the intersection of I-10 and I-75, it has become a major drug trafficking zone for the United States of America. The Mexican drug cartels are using the highways built by our grandparents to traffic drugs into our communities, and I think that's a disgrace. But I was in the interdiction room, and you've got, you know, bags of marijuana, you've got pills, you've got illegal guns that have been brought in by the Mexican drug cartels, and sitting there on the table is a box of candy, you know, like Sour Patches, Nerds candy. And I asked the sheriff, I say, what's that? That looks really out of place. And he says, actually, that's drugs brought in by the Mexican drug cartels. And I said, well, that doesn't make any sense to me. He said they figured out that if they disguise these drugs as children's candy, then it makes it easier to get into our country and makes it easier to distribute all over the United States of America. And all of us know exactly what's going to happen. A packet of that candy is going to show up on an American playground, and an American child is going to eat a piece of candy and pay for it with their life. And that is what Kamala Harris's open border has ultimately done. If you run through the problems of this country, municipal budgets that are strained, kids who can't get a good education because there are thousands of children in Georgia's schools who don't even speak English because they were brought here by illegal aliens. If you look at hospital wait times in Metro Atlanta have skyrocketed because we've got millions upon millions of people who shouldn't even be here who are getting put in front of the line of American citizens. So much of what's gone wrong in the United States of America is that Kamala Harris has rolled open the red carpet for illegal aliens, and when Donald J. Trump is president of the United States, we're going to have a different message. Pack your bags because you're going back home in 3 months, and that's what's going to happen. You know, I'm the father of three. My wife and I have three beautiful kids. We've got a 7-year-old boy, a 4-year-old boy, and a 2-year-old girl. And, you know, one of the things that I really want for my kids and something I want for all of your kids and grandkids is to grow up in a country where it's safe enough for them to play on a playground or walk down a city street at night or, God forbid, make an innocent teenage mistake where they actually learn from that mistake rather than having it claim their life. You know, some of the people I've been most affected by that I've met on the campaign trail are parents of teenagers. And they tell me about their teenager who goes to a party and takes something under peer pressure because, look, sometimes kids do that, right? They take things at parties under peer pressure. But instead of waking up with a headache or a lecture from their parents, that innocent teenage mistake takes their life. Because too many of the drugs floating around this country are laced with fentanyl brought in by the Mexican drug cartels. And I think about that, and then I consider the fact that over the last 3 years, Kamala Harris has hired 87,000 IRS bureaucrats to go to war against American small businesses and American middle-class families. And wouldn't it be nice to have a president of the United States who waged war on the Mexican drug cartels and left our citizens the hell alone? And you know, for all the policy disagreements, all the things that Kamala Harris has done wrong, all the things that Kamala Harris broke, the biggest problem that I have with her is not just what she's done in office, but the complete disrespect, the condescension, and even the hatred in the way that she talks about her fellow citizens. And look, I mean, we're all, of course, supporters of Donald J. Trump. I know there are a lot of people watching who love President Donald J. Trump, and we're going to get him across the finish line tomorrow. But here's what I want to remind you of what Kamala Harris has done, and I want to ask us not to follow her very terrible example. Because when her boss, just a couple of days ago, said not just a criticism of Donald Trump or of me, but said that the people who support Donald J. Trump are garbage, or when Kamala Harris's running mate accused the patriots who gathered at Donald Trump rallies of being Nazis, or when they call us fascists, or when they call us racist for thinking that we ought to have a secure southern border. All I can think is, wouldn't it be nice to have an American president who loved the people of this country rather than hated the people of this country? And I want to ask us not to follow Kamala Harris's terrible example, because I'm sure that every single one of us, all of us gathered here, know somebody who's planning to vote the wrong way tomorrow. And number one, please do everything you can to make sure they vote the right way tomorrow, because we need everybody's vote, and that's how we're going to win this race, is persuading our fellow citizens. But look, there are going to be people we love who vote the wrong way tomorrow. And the thing that I'd ask you is to not discard lifelong family relationships, not to discard friendships because people vote the wrong way. Here in our movement, we love every citizen of this country. We want their prosperity because we love this nation, and that means loving the people who live here. And our message to Kamala Harris is very simple. The citizens of this country, they are not garbage for thinking that you're doing a bad job. The citizens of this country are not racist for thinking that you ought to close down that damn southern border. The citizens of this country are not garbage for wanting to be able to afford groceries and a nice place to live. But in 2 days, we are going to take out the trash in Washington, D.C., and the trash's name is Kamala Harris. All right, so let me leave you with one final thought here, because this is our third event of the day, and you know, let me just say something about President Trump. For as much as Kamala Harris and her allies in the corporate media constantly lie about Donald J. Trump, let me tell you a little story about President Trump. So this was probably 6 weeks ago. I'm just guessing because I don't remember the exact date, but it was the date where Donald Trump was assassinated, or there was an attempted assassination for a second time. This was not in Butler, Pennsylvania, but this was a few weeks later, where an assassin in Florida got very close to taking the president's life, a would-be assassin, thank God. And the president called me, and it was before the news became public, and I was sitting at home in Cincinnati with my 7-year-old son, and he says, JD, they tried to do it again. I said, they tried to do what again? And he explained what had happened. And of course, my initial thought is for him. I say, sir, are you doing okay? You know, obviously, you're physically okay, or you wouldn't be calling me. But, you know, that's a pretty traumatic thing to happen twice in as many months. Are you doing okay? And he said, yeah, I'm doing fine. I'm kind of pissed off because I was about to make a birdie on the 6th hole, and the Secret Service wouldn't let me finish. And I had a realization, something that hadn't quite clicked with me about President Trump until that moment, which is that, again, he is the most lied about person maybe in the history of the United States of America. But agree or disagree with him on any given issue, agree or disagree with me on what I say or a particular policy, but here was a man who had just taken a second assassination attempt in as many months, and he had the good humor and the character to make a joke about it, and that's the kind of man that we want in the Oval Office. The thing that The thing I think it's hard to fully appreciate, I think all of us understand it, but it's hard to fully appreciate that the presidency of the United States is not just about enacting public policy, and it's not just about leadership, it's about handling moments of crisis when those moments of crisis inevitably come up. And think about the way that Kamala Harris has run this campaign, and think about the way that Donald Trump has run his campaign. Just today, the last day of the campaign, Donald J. Trump has done will do 4 events. I think he's on his 3rd event right now, and here I am on my 3rd event, and we'll both do one more event before the day is over. Kamala Harris, I think, did a single event yesterday. And today, she's in 1 state, while her running mate is in 1 state. I think I've hit 4 states, or will by the end of the day. Who do we want answering that phone call when times are really tough? Who do we want dealing with a world leader in a moment of crisis? Is it Kamala Harris, who runs away from the friendly American media, or is it Donald J. Trump, a man who can take a bullet to the head and stand in defiance? It's a big difference. We don't talk about it enough. But look, it's very easy at this stage. I mean, we're all patriots. We love this country. We want to fix the broken leadership. It's very easy at this stage of the campaign to get a little tunnel vision about the politics and to forget the stakes. This is not just red team versus blue team. Think about this. We've got, in this common sense movement, we've got the lieutenant governor and the governor of Georgia, Nikki Haley on the right, and Tulsi Gabbard and Bobby Kennedy on the left. This is a big tent, my friends. So it's not just red team versus blue team. And it's not even just about beating Kamala Harris as much as, trust me, I will enjoy beating Kamala Harris more than any person in this room. Maybe even more than Mike Collins. I really want to beat Kamala Harris. But think about what's at stake. And let me just offer you a few insights into some of the people that I've gotten to know over the last few months on the campaign trail. Other than being married to that beautiful woman there, the honor of my life is to get to stand up here and ask you all to be the next Vice President of the United States. It's an incredible thing. And thank you. And given the poor family that I grew up in, the fact that I was raised by a grandmother who didn't even go to high school, much less to college, it is hard not to feel anything but incredible, overwhelming gratitude for this nation and for the American dream that made my life possible. But there are a lot of our fellow citizens out there where the American dream feels further and further away. I mentioned these parents that I meet who lost a 16-year-old kid because one of their kids went to a party and took something that was laced with Mexican drug cartel fentanyl, and now their teenager is no longer with us. I met a woman not long ago who told me that for 40 years, she and her husband did steak night every Friday night, but last year they canceled steak night because thanks to Kamala Harris's policies, groceries got too expensive and she had to cancel that ritual that had brought meaning to her life for 40 years. I've met people who have been killed by illegal criminals brought into this country across that wide open southern border. I've met young people who would love to start a family, but they're worried they're never going to be able to afford a house in which to raise that family. Our fellow citizens, my friends, are struggling. They're struggling because of the failed leadership in Washington, D.C. And what this election is about, it's not just about beating Kamala Harris. It's about creating American communities that are safe enough to raise a family in. It's about making it possible for those young Americans to afford to buy a home, to start a family in the first place. It's about American parents who would like to raise their children in neighborhoods that are safe and secure. It's about a woman who would like to afford steak night with her husband because she's worked hard her entire life. My friends, our fellow Americans deserve to have peace. They deserve to have prosperity, and they're going to get it tomorrow when we make Donald J. Trump the leader of this country and the President of the United States. God bless you, Georgia. Let's go get it done.